So I want to show you how to debug a Node.js function in OpenFaaS. We're going to start off with this Node.js Express template from GitHub, and we're going to pull that down to our local computer. Let's just make a quick folder, node debug test, and we'll do FaaS template pull, which will then enable us to create a new function using this template. And we can call this one debug test. I'm going to put my Docker Hub name as a prefix, and then let's open Visual Studio Code. Now, in general, I prefer less typing, so what I'm going to do is rename this YAML file to stack.yaml so that we don't have to specify that each time. Then we can see that we have our handler, and it's going to run through and just give us back a JSON message. It will use whatever we posted in the request. And there's our stack YAML. So normally what we want to do is fast CLI up, pass the gateway, which in this instance is an Intel NUC running Kubernetes inside my home network. That was a Docker build. It's already cached. It's now pushing up the image. Again, cache step, and then we will see that get deployed. So while we're waiting for this, in Node, there is an environmental variable called node options, and this can be used to enter some of the flags that you would normally type in on the command line. So if you are normally wanting to debug, you can type in node inspect main.js, for instance. In this instance, we actually do want that flag, but we can't change the command in the container in OpenFaaS. But we can change environmental variables really easily. So we go over to our stack YAML file, and we'll start a new segment for environment. And this is where we'll pass that value. Again, you could even change the port if you wanted to. Now when we run this, we will see that port 9229 will be exposed on the pod where OpenFaaS is running. We can actually port forward that back to our computer here in order to attach to it and start debugging it. In order to do that, I'm going to open a terminal. This is one that I prepared earlier. And every OpenFaaS function actually ends up being a deployment in a cluster in the OpenFaaS FN namespace. So all I'm doing is kubectl port forward, and I'm bringing back this port, which is only available in the pod, to my local computer, to localhost. Now just to be sure that that worked, we could do something like use netcat, just to see that there's something listening there. And we see that there's something there and it's ready for a connection. At this point in time, we look in the build folder, we'll actually see all of the code that was built into this function, starting from the main handler, working its way down, including the Docker file. This is important, and I'll show you why. Now it's over to the debug pane, and actually what we want to do here is we want to debug this Node.js. We don't want a local debug. No, what we want to do is attach to a remote process. Here we get to specify the TCP IP. That's our local host. We can specify the port. And then we know that the code on the container is running in home app. If you're not sure about this, then you can actually do an exec inside the running container just to check. So a workspace folder is relative to where we are at the root, then build, then debug test. So let's try that. Build, debug test. So with any luck, this should just work, and we'll be able to drop a breakpoint in here. So I'm on the debug pane and I'm hitting play, So we actually have two debug configs. We need to get rid of the local one. Let's try it again. Okay, attached to remote, Node, OpenFaaS, Node.js listening on port 3000. So we're actually attached, and we can see the connection. The next thing for us to do is to go ahead and invoke the function. Let's try that now. Invoke debug test. I don't know. Let's just send in a string. We've now hit the debug breakpoint, and we can see the event. The body is Darwin, which is what came from uname. This is a post. The path query is there as well, and we also have the context where we've got the current set status code. We can continue with this. Now, you may see that this timed out, and this is because of the default timeout value in the OpenFaaS CLI is relatively short. So if we want to invoke it another way, we can actually invoke it through curl. And this time, rather than doing a post, we'll do a get. We'll check that we get the path. So let's put user Alex, try it again. And then inside the event, we see it's a get and the path has come through. And then just like you would debug any other code, you can step over these parts, even, I believe, change the contents of these variables, and then hit play, and you'll get your result back. And so that's a way in which you can debug a Node.js function on OpenFaaS. Pretty simple. It involved us basically updating our stack YAML to give Node an additional parameter. We also created a remote attachment for a debug config pointing at the localhost, port 9229. We set the workspace folder to where the code had been built, and then we ran kubectl port forward and the name of the deployment. And that's it. That's how you can debug your Node.js functions.